Are you wondering why you are not making any money from the dividends of your favorite companies, but then you realize that you only have $20 invest in them, and now you're trying to find a way to grow your capital before to invest for passive income? Well, in this video, I will share with you what are the top 3 best growth ETFs that you can buy right now if you want to receive some insane growth in the next couple of years, even throughout a recession. But first, let me explain how I picked my different ETFs. If you've watched my latest video on what are the best 5 dividend ETFs that you can buy in 2022, you might know that the ETFs are the best way to invest to receive a lot of different stocks within only one ticker, which actually has the impact to reduce the risk of your portfolio and increase the overall potential return. But now, to pick the growth ETFs, it is a little bit different. First, compared to the usual dividend stocks, the growth companies are usually a little bit more risky. In the case of growth stocks, they are usually using what are called the retained earnings, which is basically a subtraction between the net income of the company and the dividends that are given to the shareholders. But in the case of the growth stocks, they are usually not giving any dividends to the shareholders. They are usually reinvesting this money into the company to make it grow even more. So if you're someone that is looking to grow its capital as much as possible in the next years, and that is not too much scared about the current conditions on the market, well, stay tuned and discover with me what are my different picks. For my first ETF, I've decided to go into a category that is not necessarily known by many investors because of the difficulty for them to analyze the stocks within the ETF. My first pick is the Vanguard Small Cap Growth ETF with the ticker VBK. This ETF actually has the objective to track the CRSP Small Growth Index, which, as its name is saying it, is composed of small capitalization growth companies. Just for a little reminder, the small cap companies are usually companies with a market capitalization of around $300 million and $2 billion. And if we compare it with some giants of this world like Google and Meta, this is only some peanuts. But this makes that there are many different undervalued stocks among those small capitalization companies. The thing is that if you personally would like to invest in smaller companies by yourself, it could be pretty hard for you to pick which stocks are really undervalued and which stocks are not, because you don't necessarily have a team with you to help you to analyze the stocks. And usually the problem with the small cap companies is the fact that they have less transparency with the shareholders. It makes that the investing information about them is pretty hard to find. But since it is easier for all the different ETFs companies to acquire a higher stake in those companies compared to, for example, investing into a $2 trillion market capitalization of Google, it makes that those ETFs fund will have more power in the companies compared to the mega tech companies where they are invest also. Compared to the large cap companies that are usually more stable, investing in those smaller companies are what I would call a high risk, high reward play. And in fact, if we take a look at what is the biggest holdings of this fund, I don't personally see any companies that I know in that fund. But the thing is that all the companies that will be within the fund will have some low ponderation to make sure that there are not too much risk in that ETF. But still, this play would have given to you about 11% of yearly return on a 10 years period. And this fund also have a great diversification by sector, where we can see that the healthcare come at the first place, closely followed by the tech, the consumer discretionary, and the industrials. And this ETF is available for only a small fee of 0.07%, which represent about $7 per $10,000 invest. And finally, we can see that this fund is giving some quarterly distribution to its holders, and it has a 5 stars quote on the risk reward side, which means that, as I told you, you must be willing to take more risk if you invest in that kind of fund. And this has been reflected in the less 23% of year-to-date return. Now for my second pick, I've decided to go into a sector that has been the best performer over the past couple of years. Obviously, I am talking about the information technology sector, and to replicate this kind of sector, I've decided to go with the Vanguard Information Technology ETF with the ticker VGT. With an insane performance of about 20% per year on a 10 years period, this ETF has been beating some records in the past couple of years. Obviously, its goal, as I told you, is to track an index composed of information technology stocks. This is why we can find companies as Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, and Visa in its biggest holdings. And in fact, only Apple and Microsoft represent by themselves about 40% of the entire fund. And since those two companies have been performing super well since the past couple of years, this has been driving some good results for this fund. However, in terms of sector, this ETF is not divided as usual. In fact, since usually the information technology is one sector, it means that this ETF is subdivided within this sector. So you can see that the technology, hardware, and storage comes at the first place with about 25% of the fund, which is also followed closely by the semiconductor and the software. For a small fees of only 0.10%, which represent $10 per $10,000 invest, you can obtain more than 370 different technology stocks within this ETF. And this fund is also giving some quarterly distribution to its holders. Just like my first pick, this ETF has a 5 stars rating in terms of risk reward, which is represented by a less 22% of year-to-date return. If you're a big tech guy and that you believe that the computer and the science will dominate in the next couple of years, and obviously that you're not scared to take any kind of risk, well, this ETF could be a great addition to your portfolio. And finally, for my last pick, if there was only one ETF where I could invest, I would probably invest it into this pick. This is actually one of the largest and most popular funds in the entire world, which is investing in the largest stock market in the world. Personally, to replicate this market, I would go with the Vanguard S&P 500 Index ETF with the ticker VOO. This fund has the objective to track the S&P 500 Index, which is an index in the US that is composed of the 500 biggest American companies in terms of market capitalization. So of course, companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Alphabet, and Berkshire Hathaway are all some of its biggest holdings. And with this, the technology sector is the largest sector in the entire portfolio with more than 30% of the total asset. And this is followed by the healthcare, the consumer discretionary, and the financial. In total, this ETF counts more than 504 different stocks. And obviously, because it is about the market capitalization value of the companies, the top holdings of this fund worth the majority of this ETF. And you can obtain this fund for the mere fees of only 0.04%, which represent about $4 per $10,000 invest. And this ETF has a great 14% of average yearly return on a 10 years period. And just like my two first pick, this ETF is giving some quarterly distribution to its holders, but on its part, it has a 4 stars risk reward quote, which means that even if it had a lower return compared to the tech ETF, VOO has less risk compared to the two other picks. And for all the Canadian, I would recommend you to check out VFV, which is basically the equivalent of VOO but in Canadian dollars. However, if you currently have a lot of cash on your side and you want to invest to receive some interesting cash flow from the dividend and receive some great passive income, well, another great option that you could do is to invest into dividend ETF. And in that case, check out the video that's gonna appear just right over here. And if you like personal finance, make sure to join the North family by subscribing to the channel for only $0.0. And I will see you soon. Peace!